that you've got to look much further than nuts and bolts. I mean, what we currently understand in advanced physics, it isn't as advanced as we'd like to believe.
If this mathematics is right, it means that there will be a whole class of things that we can do that will look like magic to our current technologies and won't need necessarily to conform to the laws of physics.
Are we talking, sticks and stones to superconductors advanced difference?
Absolutely.
Then we have the first layer of software outside of the space-time headset. That means that the technologies that we should eventually evolve are going to be mind-boggling, that are indistinguishable from magic right now.
But I'd be interested in how in the world they got here.
Good luck going to our nearest galaxy anytime soon through space-time. But if we have the software for the headset and space-time is just a headset, we don't have to go through space-time. We should be able to go around space-time.
On today's show, we're going to discuss the big picture. Too many people have such a narrow view when we're talking about the UFO phenomena, whether it's focusing on just the government disclosure aspect of it or just the experiencer angle. We need to widen our scope and look at the full stage all of this is taking place on. We have to look at the full tapestry. Recently, the head of AAWSAP, which was the government's largest formally acknowledged UFO program, Dr. James Lacatski, appeared on another weaponized episode. What he basically admitted was that we are in the middle of a controlled disclosure by the government. He is kind of stepping us through that process. I'm sure he is one of many mouthpieces that are stepping us through this process. But he said something that I've been saying for a while, which is something I kind of realized early on, is we need to look beyond the nuts and bolts. Everyone gets distracted by the shiny technology, but he says we're not going to understand anything if we don't take a much broader look at all the strange stuff with reality, as Corbell put it, that's happening around the UFO subject. Because whether you like it or not, this stuff is happening, and we're not going to get any further if we just keep this narrow focus.
And I think what you were trying to say to us is if you just think you're going to study UFOs, you're going to be smacked with reality. Reality is the UFO phenomenon is just shrouded and covered with what you would call, I don't know, the good word, abnormal aspects of reality.
Yes. That you've got to look much further than nuts and bolts.
And I'm not talking about just in the UFO sphere. We need to look at everything that's going on right now. So I'm going to go into recent statements by cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman on a recent interview and what high energy physics is telling us about the nature of reality and the types of what he says mind-blowing technology we would be able to create from this new understanding. And it's going to sound pretty familiar once we get to that part. And this ties back into previous statements by Lacatski about consciousness and comments about teleportation in the most recent Age of Disclosure trailer. Also comments by White House science advisor Michael Kratsios, where he claimed U.S. technology can manipulate time and space. And also what attorney Danny Sheehan said quite a number of years ago about teleportation as well. We're going to build upon all of this and also explore the origin of the Greys according to the late UFO researcher and author Nigel Kerner and his theory of the nature of reality, what he called the Godverse. That and a whole lot more. I'm excited to get into this one. Let's go.
There's footage and records of objects in the skies.
UAPs are unexplained, it's true, but they are real.
I think that there is a link between human consciousness and the phenomenon.
Greetings, beautiful people, fellow citizens of the planet Earth, and welcome to the Lucid Lens. I have redone my studio a little bit and changing up the format. I'm trying to get to a point where this is less of a lift for me to do more regular videos. I just want to be able to remove the barriers between me seeing all these things happening and wanting to kind of commentate and kind of connect dots between a lot of different things that I'm noticing. And I've like to get kind of like in the weeds and writing scripts and doing highly edited stuff. And so I was like, I'm trying to figure out a way that I can just kind of remove those barriers, just be more regular about putting content out, still keeping kind of the high level that I've set for myself. I mean, I have a career in like branding and marketing and, cinematography. I want to maintain that high level of quality, but just not get so in the weeds with writing scripts and all that stuff. And just this can be a little more natural conversation. So I might clean it up in the edit if I kind of meander or wander off course. But anyway, that's what's going on. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, like, share, comment, all of that good stuff. It helps, the algorithm and all those things. So I really appreciate that. And so let's get into this. Let's establish what reality is. We need to get onto a baseline. So Dr. Lacatski made a lot of statements, and most prominently, I want to focus on him kind of saying, look, it's more than nuts and bolts. We've got the human potential aspect. We've got the greater reality with all the strangeness that surrounds, UFOs. And he also admitted that we're going through a controlled disclosure, right? He said something to Corbell that the craft are not even the most exciting aspect of this. There's more, right? There is so much more. And I see a lot of people saying, well, can Lacatski be trusted? How do we know we're not getting psyoped? And I think even he himself said something along those lines. But that's why we have to look outside of the UFO bubble. There are so many things going on right now, not connected at all, in academia, in physics, just researchers in just different connected fields, whether that's in psi phenomena, the nature of reality. We have a lot of philosophers who are doing, amazing work. And all these things kind of tie together once you kind of lower your guard and you just look at everything holistically. So that's kind of what I've been doing once I realized that this is more than just nuts and bolts flying saucers. And this is something, Jacques Vallée, realized early on too, that there's a deeper thing going on here with, consciousness and all of that. So we got to look outside the UFO bubble, and we need to take all the information in, because that'll help us better inform hypothesis and get a better understanding of the weird stuff going on with UFOs. So Donald Hoffman, if you're not familiar with, is a cognitive scientist, and he had a recent podcast appearance on Mayim Bialik's Breakdown podcast. And if you're not familiar with him, Donald Hoffman has a theory that reality is, we're just kind of looking at it through a headset. Not literally, like we can't just take the headset off and we're in our real bodies. No. That's the analogy he uses. We're not literally like in the Matrix, but it's just an analogy to kind of say that, hey, whatever we're experiencing in our normal waking physical life is not the true reality, right? So here is how he views reality, and why we can pretty much take it to the bank that space-time is not real, not fundamental, and why it allows us to kind of incorporate some of this into our thinking.
Because if what's outside of the headset is this infinite consciousness. So what I'm saying is, ultimately, who are you? You are completely transcendent. You are the infinite consciousness looking through a very, very small headset that only has trillions of experiences. So you've chosen to go from infinity to just a few trillion experiences that you can see yourself through. But you are that infinite consciousness. So you are transcendent, and you could then play with these rules. You could play with what you see inside this particular headset. What the physicists are finding are these positive geometries. They're just static objects. They're like monoliths outside of space-time, and their shapes and volumes code for particle interactions inside space-time. Remarkably, they actually give you the probabilities for various kinds of particle interaction. But why it's anybody's guess about why these things are doing that and so forth. So we don't have a good framework of what's outside of space-time. I mean, that's the big question. If space-time isn't fundamental, first, what could that possibly mean? What could possibly be outside of space-time? That's the first question. Most of us go, space-time is the foundation of reality. What are you even talking about? So the physicists are saying, whatever space-time is, it falls apart at the Planck scale. So we have to find something outside of space-time, and it's anybody's guess what it is. Now, spiritual traditions, of course, have been there for thousands of years. They've been saying space-time is not, or space and time are the final reality. There's something well beyond space and time. And they've had techniques like meditation and so forth to help you to sort of transcend the notion of space-time. But so both sides have had a piece of the puzzle. The physicalists, the scientists, have had the rigor of mathematical models. And the spiritual people have had the idea that space and time aren't fundamental, that there's something deeper than that, but they've not had any mathematical tools. They've only had intuitive tools and so forth.
So positive geometry is a new mathematical framework used in physics that describes physical processes like particle scattering using geometric shapes instead of space-time. These shapes, such as higher dimensional versions of cubes and pyramids, are proposed as a way to unify quantum mechanics and gravity by replacing the concepts of space and time with more fundamental mathematical principles. And research into positive geometry aims to determine if it can be a foundation for a theory of everything, which is exactly what Donald Hoffman is positing. And so one of the most, I think, famous positive geometries that was discovered, I believe around 10 to 15 years ago, is the amplituhedron. And so this is a geometric shape that can't physically exist. I mean, the best way I can describe it is think of an M.C. Escher painting, an impossible staircase that you could not physically construct because it's going up and it's down and the perspective doesn't make any sense, right? So this is kind of how these geometric positive geometries are. They can't physically exist. They're like going through each other, and then up is down and left is right. And so it doesn't make any sense in a three-dimensional space. But high energy physics they've discovered these, and they're using them to measure different particle reactions and quantum effects. And it's a layer outside of space-time, which means that space and time isn't fundamental because they're able to do things from outside of it. And also gravity and quantum mechanics, these things they're not enough either. We need to go below those because those are just kind of projected from whatever deeper layer of reality is computing all of this, right? So space and time is not fundamental. It's not base reality. There's a deeper level than general relativity, gravity, and quantum physics, which relies on space-time. So most people still don't realize that physics proved the universe isn't locally real, like a few years ago, and then the Nobel Prize in physics was awarded for that work. And so going back to Lacatski, the UAP, the one that he's allowed to talk about now, he says it's very advanced. It's very, very advanced, and with worldwide repercussions. And yeah, I think Corbell said the analogy of like going from like sticks and stones to like semiconductors, like that kind of advancement. Like we can't even fathom the types of technology and what this is kind of derived from.
You alluded that the UFO in the possession of the U.S. makes the technology described in your other book, Initial Revelations, look primitive.
Very, very advanced, and with worldwide repercussions.
Are we talking, sticks and stones to superconductors advanced difference?
Absolutely.
So let's listen to the types of technology Donald Hoffman thinks we would be able to create if we applied this new type of thinking built from a framework that's outside of space-time.
that means that the technologies that we should eventually evolve are going to be mind-boggling. For example, one thing that occurs to me is our nearest galaxy, the Andromeda, is 2.4 million light years away. Good luck getting there. That 2.4 million light years away. So you have to go really fast for a very, very long time to get there. And if you go really, really fast, like if you're going like a tenth of the speed of light or something like that, if you run into a piece of dust on the way, you're toast. So, I mean, good luck going to our nearest galaxy anytime soon through space-time. But if we have the software for the headset and space-time is just a headset, we don't have to go through space-time. We should be able to go around space-time. So we should have technologies that would be real technologies that can move us around space-time. Now, I'm not saying I know how to do that yet. I'm just saying this is the kind of thing that opens up.
Well, and plenty of people have, tried to explain anomalous things that they have seen in the sky, which seem to be traveling outside of the rules of observation, not obeying laws of gravity, physics, or the speed of light. This is one of those hand-waving ideas that people say, oh, well, it's operating outside of space and time, and of course it's going to have movement that you can't track because it's operating a different way. That's just hand-waving until you add an actual mathematical concept that explains ways that the space and time that we are operating in to even devise that potential may be limiting in and of itself.
If this mathematics is right, it means that there will be a whole class of things that we can do that will look like magic to our current technologies and won't need necessarily to conform to the laws of physics inside our headset. Because once you know how to program the headset, you don't have to obey the laws of the headset. You make the laws of the headset and you can change them. So that's what will be fun to do.
Can we just, for a second, play a little brainstorm game that if this software proves to be solid and true, we're talking about time travel, are we talking about regeneration of the human form? Are we talking about proving consciousness? Can you brainstorm a little bit with us? We're in the headset. It's not probable now that we could potentially teleport from one city to another, but it may be. But can you give us some other examples of some of the things that could be possible?
Well, the way I would answer your question would be myself to think about if I wrote Grand Theft Auto, what could I do that would surprise the players inside Grand Theft Auto? So I could do things like I could all of a sudden you're driving a Ferrari. Oh, now all of a sudden you're driving a Mustang.
Could this technology allow me to download a language? Could it allow me to regrow a limb? Could it allow me to have communication non-verbally with anyone I choose to communicate with?
I see no reason not. Like in the Matrix, right? Neo all of a sudden downloads something, and now I know Kung Fu or something like that, right?
I would like to know Kung Fu.
Again, I'm not saying I know how to do it, but I'm saying I don't see a principled obstruction.
Okay, those kinds of things sound pretty familiar, right? I mean, we're basically talking about what we're observing with UAP and other various anomalous phenomena. So technology built from the principle that consciousness is, a fundamental layer underneath space-time, or at least maybe it's not the end-all be-all, but it's deeper than space-time, right? And so with that kind of deeper level knowledge, I think about it like coding to the metal, like as a computer analogy. You're closer to the true actual bedrock of whatever you're doing, right? So, and the technology application could look much different than the technology we currently have today, right? Think about what Lacatski said about this ship, and George Knapp always kind of hammers it. He's like, well, how do you know it was a ship? It didn't have fuel. It didn't have a fuel source. It didn't have engines. Didn't have wings. The inside of the ship looked just like the outside of the ship. It's just a smooth surface. What could that even be? And so this kind of, it seems like it's not really technology in a sense that we could relate to technology, right? Everything with our current, trajectory, our tech totem pole is, microprocessors getting smaller and smaller and smaller. and more complex circuitry, when this is like just completely built on a different fundamental understanding of how reality works. I mean, kind of think Nikola Tesla's everything is frequency and vibration. These just could be very specific atomic layerings of materials with various properties. And then you've got the consciousness aspect. How does that play in, right? We've all heard about some of these craft are powered by, just pilots putting on a headset, or maybe not even needing to do that. Maybe they can do it remotely as well. So that's kind of all in play here. And the other thing they asked Lacatski was, is the craft itself conscious? And one of the things he said, I can't answer that.
You can't answer. You're not going to answer that, I assume, right? I imagine you can't answer.
We can't go into that. We can't say this at this point.
Inch by inch.
You can't.
You're making it.
Yeah, right. You can't eat the whole whale at once. I think this interview, I'm saying much more than the first one.
So Lacatski also has spoken about how each UFO looks different. I think the analogy he used was all of our vehicles are starting to look the same, and you wouldn't only know what something is unless you looked at the badge on it, right? Where every UFO is almost like a unique rendering. Like there's no there's commonalities in the general shape. They can kind of put them into different categories, but like no two saucer is the same. And if you think about it, there's like hundreds or thousands of different configurations of just the traditional saucer type that we've seen, right?
Obviously, my broad trend observation is every car on the road is different if you look at the UFO database. In other words, models don't then, if multiple craft are seen at the same time, yes, they can be duplicates, but in general, everything is different.
And so there's also an incident, I can't remember which book it was, but where they were on Skinwalker Ranch, and this was AAWSAP, and they had DIA agents. I believe they were on a truck, and they all saw something overhead. I believe there were 5 or 6 of them. They saw a UAP, and when they got back to the ranch and they debriefed, each of them described the UAP differently. I think one saw like an orb, one saw a triangle, and one maybe saw a saucer, but they all described the same event. They were all looking at the same thing, and they described it differently. And there's many cases like this. Gosh, off the top of my head, I know there was one with a family driving in a car, and I believe they looked up and they saw something flying overhead. Nobody else on the road was paying attention. They were looking all around. Nobody else saw this thing. And then I feel like they took a picture maybe, and what they took the picture of was different than what they saw. So there is a lot of this conscious interaction with the UAPs, right? So, and this ties into Jacques Vallée's work with the trickster element, which was fabulously illustrated on the cover of his book, The Passport to Magonia. Is it one entity masquerading as all the others? Or are there just that many different types? But then what's the consciousness connection? Are we kind of helping render what we look at when we see these craft? So physicists are declaring the death of space-time, right? Because what we're looking at every day just does not make sense in a materialist point of view. 10 years ago, hundreds of world-renowned, internationally recognized scientists convened to address the limitations of this materialist ideology. And they propose a post-material paradigm where mind and consciousness are considered fundamental aspects of the universe. So the Academy of the Post-Material Sciences was created. That's massive. That's a huge leap. I mean, this ties into what's going on with the telepathy tapes and the revelations that are coming out of that podcast. I mean, it started out with just kind of the human potential aspect with telepathy and communication, and then it just kind of grew into this greater reality. And this is paralleled with what science is discovering. And these are all completely separate from the whole UFO subject. This ties into my buddy Pavel at the Psychoactivo podcast. He talks about Jacobo Grinberg and his syntregenic theory, where, brains interact and they connect through the universal lattice. This is like the morphic field theory by Rupert Sheldrake. There's so many different people in parallel coming to the same realization. And it's not even just individual scientists. We've got the PEAR Labs who conducted PEAR Labs at Princeton. I think it's Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research. And they conducted over 650 remote viewing trials. They released over 60 publications, and they calculated the odds of these results being due to chance, meaning they confirmed remote viewing was real. The odds of it being due to chance was 3 in 10 billion. So that was a 6.2 sigma score, which was like we put drugs out on the market for much less. Like if this was a new drug trial, it would be one of the most efficient. Mediumship experiments have been published over the past 20 years from research at the University of Arizona, Virginia, Glasgow, and Scotland, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and Windbridge. They've also imaged mediums' brains at Temple University, Pennsylvania, and Noetic Sciences. And the data from Dr. Gary Schwartz's medium research is 1 billion times over the typical requirement for acceptance of data validity in a traditional scientific journal. 1 billion times over the typical requirement. They're confirming that mediumship, people who communicate with post-material, the deceased. I mean, let that sink in for a moment. Like the big picture that science is showing us right now, completely separate from UFO world. So, technologies that are indistinguishable from magic. And if you take all this into consideration, we already kind of use some magical, technologies based on quantum principles today. I mean, everyone in their pocket has a computer with a microprocessor that leverages something called quantum tunneling, where electrons pass through a physical barrier. And we're having issues with this now as we get below, I think it's like 7 nanometers or 5 nanometers. They've had to kind of change the way that they structured like a transistor gate because like leakage and all that stuff. But we're leveraging these principles that things are passing through barriers. I mean, does that sound familiar with experiencers where entities pass right through walls, or we have UFOs passing right into mountains? And these are principles that we're just kind of scraping up against right now. We call them quantum, but really it's something even deeper and more holistic than that. So, and this touches on the teleportation, like Age of Disclosure. I can't remember who it was. Might have been Andre Carson. In the latest trailer that I saw, he's like, we can talk about teleportation.
We can talk more about teleportation.
And attorney Danny Sheehan has spoken about teleportation just a few years ago on the New Thinking Aloud podcast with Jeffrey Mishlove. And in case you missed it, check this out.
That they actually were in one room and they put a Coke bottle. I don't know why they picked the Coke bottle for the example, other than the fact that it's kind of archetypal. But they had a Coke bottle and they put it on the table and had him put a little tag on it, writing his signature on it. And they had him go into this other room, and he waited there, and he heard this kind of weird noise, and this light started to appear on the table, and the Coke bottle manifested in the other room, with his signature and stuff on the bottle, and so that they're experimenting with this kind of teleportation thing that may have something to do with the way that the UFO vehicles move from one star system to another one without having to just travel super fast, so that we know they've been doing this.
So the big picture thing is reality's weird. We barely understand it. We're finding out that space and time aren't real, right? And then we've got the whole human potential aspect with telepathy being like tested and proven, and it's hard to kind of gauge and so, but building on the PEAR Labs research with remote viewing, Roger Nelson started the Global Consciousness Project, and they kind of expanded these experiments where they used random number generators, and they placed them around the world to generate like global shifts in consciousness to see how major world events might impact these number generators that were just constantly running in the background. And they saw that like the 9/11 attacks, global meditations, natural disasters, even New Year's Eve celebrations. The machines detected statistically significant deviations from chance. And this suggests that when large groups of people focus their attention on something or their emotions on something, the same event, they collectively influence the random number generators. Like that, we're changing reality with just our thoughts. Nelson and the team calculated the odds of these effects being due to chance are 1 in a trillion. Again, you can't deny, even though the effects were small, they're still happening. I mean, that's like saying, like, I can't believe more people aren't like going like, oh my God, that's insane. Yeah, the effects are small. It's like, I can fly, but only a little bit on Tuesdays. So everyone's like, get out of here. Who cares about that? I mean, that's crazy, right? So they talk about how this suggests that conscious intent is not just a personal phenomena, but something that can manifest on a global scale. And, reinforcing the idea that consciousness is not limited to our individual experiences, but might connect to some larger universal consciousness or quantum field or whatever word, you want to use to describe it. Just like in Thomas Campbell's own theory, where he calls it the larger consciousness system. And some religions just call it God. I mean, it doesn't really matter what we're calling it. It's the thing that is underneath space-time that all of us kind of are coming out of, right? Another great experiment that kind of showed this was a French researcher, René PEAR. And along with the precursor to the Swiss Institute of Noetic Sciences, they conducted a series of groundbreaking experiments with newly hatched chickens and robots that were controlled by a random number generator. So a chicken will imprint on the first moving object they see when they hatch. And so they had them imprint on these robots. And so the robot was driven by a random number generator. And every few seconds, it would randomly kind of change its direction. And they had like a marker like pointed down at the bottom of it and the table had paper on it so they could kind of trace its path and, kind of get a baseline of where this thing would move. And it was completely random. I think I have a graphic I'll throw up like right here. And anyway, so they did that to set a baseline, but then they brought in the chicks and then they put the chicks at the end of the table. And somehow the chicks being there, they thought this robot was their mother because they imprinted on it. And just their mere presence was able to influence the random robot to move closer to them and only like move on their side of the table. And I think they did the experiment again with chicks that didn't imprint. But what they did this time is they turned the lights out and they put a candle on the robot. So the chicks wanted the light, right? So they somehow influenced the candle, or the robot holding the candle, to come closer to them. I mean, so it's not just humans that have this capability to influence physical reality with, just through our intention, but perhaps all consciousness does to an extent, which if you're asking if animals are conscious, that kind of answers that. And there's many other studies with animals too, but yeah, so this is kind of what people discuss when they talk about like manifesting. We are collectively creating this reality, influencing the space-time around us. Our thoughts and intentions can affect the physical objects around us. Dr. Dean Radin has countless experiments proving this as well. My buddy Pavel, host of the Psychoactivo podcast, recently interviewed Tom Thompson, who is co-host of the Anomalous podcast. And they had a fascinating discussion about dimensions and different realities. the nature of time, and the origin of the grays, according to late researcher and author Nigel Kerner. And that conversation is kind of what inspired this episode. So earlier in the year, I actually had a brief personal correspondence with UK researcher Danielle Silverman, who for over 30 years worked alongside Nigel Kerner. And I first learned about her on the Jeff Mara podcast in an interview, and here is her explaining Nigel's theory of reality and what he called the Godverse.
Why would we come here to suffer?
Exactly. So many people face that conundrum. And a lot of people lose their sense of anything beyond the physical simply because of that contradiction, right? It's just this, people they love die, terrible things happen in their lives, and they think, okay, there can't be a God. They pray for help and it seemingly doesn't come. And they think, okay, there's nothing to this. We are just physical, right? There's nothing more. Okay, so Nigel's answer, and I do hope it's, there are some people in your audience who will feel as relieved as I did when he explained it to me. What he said was, if you trace everything back from the imperfect state of suffering that we're in now, okay, and go back in time from the Big Bang, let's say, before the Big Bang even happened, you'll arrive at a state of freedom, perfect freedom, a state of perfection, right? A state, if there is a God, it has to be a state of complete perfection, no contradiction, no limit, no restriction. And he defined God as perfect freedom and completely perfect awareness of all things, right? And for me, that was the clearest, most precise definition of what I would understand, what we term God to be, that I had ever heard, right? So he preferred not to use the term God because of all the connotations. So the connotations in most religious texts of a God are a creator God, man in the sky, somebody causing things to happen. He used to like to call it the God-verse, and in his books he calls this state of existence the God-verse. So he defined that state by two elements: awareness, perfectly free awareness, and perfectly complete awareness and perfectly free will. All options are possible in that state. There's no limit whatsoever. It's a state of no separation of points, complete union, everything is together. Because as soon as you have separation of points, you have contradiction, okay? You have everything is together, there's no contradiction. You make separation happen, there's 2 points, and there's a difference between them, okay? This is perfect harmony, reconciliation, and perfect freedom, right? In that state of perfect freedom and complete awareness, there has to be, just implicitly and logically, the potential to no longer be perfectly free. Otherwise, there's not perfect freedom. There has to be that potential there, right? In complete knowledge and complete awareness, there has to be the awareness of imperfection. Otherwise, that awareness is not complete. So his next step from that was to say, well, if there is the freedom to be imperfect, and if complete awareness has to include awareness of imperfection, our existence in a state of imperfection is implicit to the nature of existence itself. And God isn't an entity, a being that put us here to find out whether we could cope in a state of imperfection. Imperfection is a natural state of the nature of existence. Now, that doesn't mean we need to stay in imperfection. That doesn't mean that once we experience that state as an expression of the whole existential state of the Godverse, and it's the necessity for imperfection, that we can't choose to return to perfection. And according to Nigel, his summation was the 97% of missing matter in the universe that they can't find, dark matter, dark energy, whatever they call it, is what went back and didn't stay. in imperfection.
What they're basically saying is without separation or contradiction, you can't have perfection, because there would be nothing to compare against, right? If you only know one thing, one state of being, whether that's perfect or not, you wouldn't know because you have nothing to compare it against. And I thought about this a lot. Like, what's a good analogy? And I kind of go to like video games, right? Like, pretend you are, playing a game, whatever it is, and you turn on God mode, right? You've got access to everything. You can teleport around. You can instantly one-shot all the enemies. You can blow through the game in no time, and everything. You're God mode, right? Well, how boring does that get? After you do it once or twice, it's like, okay, I need a challenge. I mean, that's why we have difficulty modes in games, right? And that's basically what Nigel's saying about this reality is we come here to separate from perfection, from being able to do anything we want. And that's why we kind of go through these challenges. That's why life is hard. So each of us is an extension of, if you want to say God, that's fine. If you want to say just the universe or whatever label you want to put on it. So we're here to experience those contradictions, because God mode gets boring and you can't grow and learn and further yourself if you're not challenged. So then what does Nigel think the grays are?
So basically, we reincarnate lifetime after lifetime until we have found and realized that actually this is the true priority, or we get completely stuck and we can't reincarnate anymore. There's two ways. You can go back, or you can go up, or you can go down. You can go towards the Godverse, or you can go away from the Godverse. And the gray alien visitors that Nigel discusses in his books are the opposite to a near-death experience. They are the final culmination of our choices to go with technology, go with goals that lead us towards greater and greater physical ease and comfort, and forget that there's something infinitely better than that waiting for us if we only chose it.
Is it true that Nigel said that the grays are basically organic robots? They're not sentient beings.
Yes, absolutely. And he said this. So when I met him, he was already saying it. And that was in the early 1980s. The grays are an artificially intelligent, the expression of an artificially intelligent program. Very similar. And we can see it now because we're heading towards making the same kind of thing. So just as we send probes out into space because we can't physically go there ourselves, to Mars or wherever, these are another civilization in the universe sending out a probe, but of a far more advanced kind than anything we have produced so far. So it's the end stage of us, the ultimate devolution, where there's no awareness anymore, no connection, only an artificial existence. But I think that a very important point I'd like to make here now is that it would be, I believe, mistaken to view the grays as an out there space creature, technology type entity that's coming to us and doing stuff to us that we don't want to do. Yes, that exists, okay? But they are more intrinsic than that. They're not out there. Our whole system right now that we're developing and embracing so wholeheartedly, developing AI, developing all kinds of ways that we can move our existence from a real face-to-face physical existence, connecting with each other, to an online existence. We are transforming ourselves into that program right now, and they are nothing more than a program. You might see gray creatures in robotic form. It's just the expression of a program, a printout, if you like, of a program. What do you think? Let me ask you that question, Jeff. What do you think we have that they don't have?
The connection to the Godverse.
Yeah, exactly. They're purely it's an artificial program. It has no connection. And the reason why, you might say, well, why do they want a connection to the Godverse? If they can have all this technology and travel all at the speed, faster than the speed of light and do all that they do, why do they want that connection? Well, it's to do with what I spoke about earlier, entropy, the second law of thermodynamics. Everything in a physical universe is breaking down and going into more and more chaotic states with time. As they are purely physical, so are they. So is their information format, their program. It too will break down. Any artificial intelligence has to be programmed to survive into the future. They will just notice, or the program will just notice, that a certain information field, which you might call a soul, a specific information field, seems to go out of physical existence and come back in again. Reincarnation. The same fingerprint of information, a soul, goes in and out. They don't have that. So they see that death is not death for us. The entropic breakdown and decay, when our bodies die, is not death for us because we seemingly come back. There's a fingerprint that seems to keep coming and going. This is their holy grail. The continuance against the entropic drift. And the only way they can marry in to that continuance, because they have no connection and can never have any connection to the Godverse, is to what Nigel called piggybacking on us. So to join onto us, to connect into us, so that their program, because they are only a program, can be part of us. And then if their program is part of us, when we live forever, so does the program. So they are looking for ways to marry their program into us. And the best way they can do it is to turn us into their program.
So I was a bit confused about what she was saying. But if I understand correctly, the grays are what we would become if we further entrenched ourselves into the physical, and if we shatter any connections that we currently have to the Godverse. And so it's basically the yin to the yang. It's the built-in contradiction, right? So, I mean, we've got an obvious connection here to Bob Lazar and him stating that the grays view us as containers for souls. That tracks, right? This also connects with the founder of the Monroe Institute, Bob Monroe. And, he had this whole loosh concept. But Monroe described loosh as in kind of energetic signature produced by the full spectrum of human experience, especially in intense emotional states. So here's where everyone kind of like falls apart with this, though, because early on he framed it like Earth was a loosh farm for higher intelligence, which led some to see it as, like a dark, parasitic kind of thing. But later, Monroe explained that it wasn't really something being extracted. Loosh is something that's sacred. It's the radiance of consciousness evolving. So in other words, we're not being used, at a grand scale. We're participating in this learning, in growth, and, becoming more. So in the declassified Gateway report, it was acknowledged that frequency and vibration, again, Nikola Tesla, were central to the process of altering consciousness. And the report suggested that by entering specific brain states, individuals could tune their minds to connect with different levels of reality, much like a radio tuning into various stations. But the only problem with the Gateway report is that there was a page suspiciously missing from the initial release. And it wasn't until 2021 that missing page 25 was discovered by Thoby Campion. And this missing page sheds light on some profound concepts that delve into the idea of the absolute, which is described as the universal energy governing all of reality. Sounds pretty familiar. It suggests that our reality, which the report refers to as a universal hologram, the torus of creation, is powered by this absolute energy, and that there are countless dimensions between our reality and this ultimate source, between space-time and whatever lies beneath it. And this is eerily in line with everything we've discussed so far. And this absolute energy could be what, we call 0-point energy, which is, taking the energy from the vacuum, the quantum fluctuations when basically space-time kind of comes in and out. If you look at the Planck scale, what's in between that? It's nothing, right? So when we get down to the Planck scale, that's basically the resolution of our reality. And in between there, they can measure energy. There's nothing really is truly empty in the smallest of space. So that's what we're talking about here. And so the report notes that nearly every religion, East and West, has in some way symbolically represented this spiraling cosmic energy, such as Christianity's Holy Spirit, the Hellenic labyrinth, the Hebrew tree of life, its Hindu counterpart, or the Chinese spiral through the fourfold powers. The ultimate truth is the same. It states that 20th century physics would seem to be revisiting insights belonging to mankind as far back as written records can take us. The only difference is that we're now using left brain, linear, quantitative style reasoning to approach the same knowledge that the mystics of old acquired through holistic, intuitional, right brain styles.
But science and spirituality really diverged then, and we've seen them go separate paths. And for a while, it was sort of, important to diverge because you really needed to establish something separate from authority. You needed to have math and experiments. But now we're at this interesting intersection where high energy theoretical physics is now saying, now we agree that there's something beyond space-time. And what is it? We're finding these positive geometries, these obelisks, but what do they mean? And the spiritual traditions still don't have any mathematical tools. So here's the position we're in. It seems like science has one part of the puzzle. We have mathematical models and we have experiments. This is how you make progress and really understanding things. The spiritual traditions say, we understand that there's something beyond space-time. And the physicists are now saying, yeah, I think there is something beyond space-time. How can we try to put these two pictures together?
And it posits to truly access and understand the absolute, individuals must first achieve self-knowledge through altered states of consciousness. So it's not easy, right? You have to be intentional. And so the audio engineer, last living member of the Gateway Experience, Mark Serto, there was an interview with him maybe a couple of years ago. And he stated that the heart and mind create cohesion in this interaction between personal consciousness and the universal hologram. People who are proficient at this tend to have their hearts and minds unified. Ergo, it's really difficult to weaponize something when you're training somebody to do this and they're connecting with peace and love and harmony and unity, and you can't kill somebody because we're all connected. You are me and I am you and all that stuff, right? So he says this is one of the reasons that the CIA scrapped the idea to weaponize the Gateway program. Anyway, after watching the interview with Danielle, I had reached out because I still have many questions. And here's what she wrote back. Hi, Matthew. You ask some excellent questions. Why, thank you, Danielle. I will take them one by one. I said the overall message of the Greys, programmic nature, essentially is the yin to the yang of the togetherness of the Godverse. And that was new to me. And so she said, yes, exactly. According to Nigel, the program that is the Greys is the yin to the yang of the Godverse, meaning converted into information, all free potentials converted into fixed actuality. It is the ultimate endpoint of the choice to view the state of separation from the state of separation, which makes sense. Together, we're all perfect and one, and if you want to keep splitting and viewing, that's you become what the Greys are, I guess. You kind of are not connected to source or soul or whatever, right? So the next question is, I've heard the potential, that grays are biological robots, but not to this programmatic extent. And through accounts like Whitley Strieber, I've read that even their physical construction itself seems incomplete. For example, there were accounts where they had an esophagus that just kind of led into nothing. It just kind of like tapered off and disappeared. And so I said, this makes me wonder, could their entire existence just be manifested by, the collective human consciousness itself, or perhaps, on a grander galactic or universal, manifestation of conscious beings who are pulled towards material fixations rather than, just pulled towards material fixations of the universe and an egregore of our own making. And Danielle said, you have a profound understanding of what I was saying in the interview. Yes, indeed, they are an egregore of our own making. They are the facility for continued permanent existence in a physical universe, once we have made so many choices for that physical universe that we are unable to escape from. The atomic state of death simply because we have chosen not to. When we are trapped in atomic force after death, we write the program that creates them using the anti-force, or better said, the no-force, pen of our natural soul line of connection to the Godverse. Some poltergeist manifestations and possessions, the more violent kind, are a manifestation of this power of will pushing into atoms. We also make the gray program whilst we are in physical life. All the technological changes that are encouraging us to mortgage our human capacities for freedom, imagination, creativity, and inspiration culminating in AI taking over everything we think about and do. We are physically making artificial intelligence robots. Yeah, so I still had questions about that, but unfortunately she didn't follow up on my other questions. And this is the last question I did get a response on. You briefly touched on this, but I'm curious how this current narrative, the government-sanctioned disclosure, or theater, is currently playing out, and how does it tie into other beings commonly discussed that are almost certainly interacting with humanity? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on these other factions and where they stand with regards to possible open contact in the coming years and their relationship with the Greys. So Danielle said, I am highly cynical about the disclosure. It only happens because the timing suits the same agenda that made them keep things under wraps at the start. I suspect that agenda is to inure to the Grey phenomena to prepare us for its very obvious and undeniable arrival in the future. Factions are unimportant. This kind of super advanced technology can only come from a source derived of the loss of all meaning. Gray, green, gray, blue, pink, or polka dot, it doesn't matter. I hope I've answered your questions. Thank you for your interest. Warm wishes, Danielle Silverman. Very interesting. So I'm still, if you're not familiar with an egregore it's a thought form. It's conscious intent to manifest something. And if you're thinking that sounds kind of ridiculous, how can we just think something into an existence? Well, PEAR Labs, the Global Consciousness Project, Rene Payok's experiments already show that by thinking about something, we can alter physical reality. And this small effect grows with the number of people. I mean, this is why people swear that prayer works. I mean, what happens when 8 billion of us focus on the same thing? And this is kind of why I think we need to choose love and forgiveness over gravitating towards hate and fear. We need to lower the temperature in the room. I mean, you see what's going on out there. It's crazy. It's a fire in the madhouse, as Terence McKenna would say it, as we're getting ready to embark on the next chapter of whatever the hell this is, right? So yeah, we need to choose the higher path, or perhaps we become the Greys. We are becoming so reliant and dependent on technology. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I'm never putting a Neuralink or anything inside of my body, because I think there's other ways, as the kids in the telepathy tapes and various remote viewers are showing us, we don't need, technology embedded within us to do amazing things. I think there's a knowledge going back to, Gnostic traditions that kind of has been lost and hidden from us. And that's exactly what Lacatski is talking about. And even mentioned some coming up, something we're all going to be able to participate in. And then I love how Corbell said, is there going to be some sort of consciousness shift and we're all going to be telepathic? I mean, if you guys have seen any of the, the channelers or any folks out there, like, and take all of it with a grain of salt, please. I'm not saying I believe everything anyone says, but if you look at what science is telling us about reality, all of this is possible. So even if just 1 out of 1,000 of these people are having these precognitive, downloads or visions, and I've had experiences myself. I know it's possible. I've tried remote viewing. I've had great success with it. I've had so many like precognitive thoughts and things just happen in ways that there's no way it's just random coincidence. So, we need to figure out what the balance is, because we need to choose the higher path or we risk becoming the Greys, and which is an interesting connection to Dr. Michael Masters' theory that the Greys are future humans, because he may not be wrong in an interesting way. So here's the takeaway. Reality is so much bigger than we can ever imagine. UFOs are more than nuts and bolts. We are eternal beings here to experience contradictions and lessons and to grow. And I feel like something exciting is brewing. Anyway, that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the rabbit hole. Yeah. Until next time, be good to yourselves and each other, and I'll see you on the flip side. Peace.